Diane, thanks for coming on.
Always a pleasure, Brittany, with you.
This is so exciting, and you are joining us from APEC in San Francisco. What's the mood like there? Let's start off with that.
Well, it's interesting because my first APEC was actually 12 years ago, which was when the US last hosted, which was in Honolulu. All the conversation back then was about the Trans Pacific Partnership and a pivot to Asia. That's when Obama was in the administration. So it feels in some ways like a return to that because the message very much from President Biden has been that we, partly with this sort of reestablishment of relations with China to some extent, this idea that the US is a stable force in the world, so is China. We must engage with the region. So there are some similarities in coming full circle, but to be honest, I think one of the differences is it feels like kind of a California tech conference instead of a global conference, which is 21 economies coming together and really that intersection of business and policymakers. So I think there's certainly some disappointment from the international attendees.
Is the United States out of touch then, based on that approach?
It's a good question. I mean, a lot of it is because we're heading into election season. I'd say Joe Biden's speech, a lot of it was certainly directed at a domestic audience, which you could say sometimes is always the case, but when you're getting into details like the UAW and strikes, that's not really resonating with a global audience. So yes, to some extent, I suppose there's a certain irresistible component. You're in San Francisco, so you can get the head of Google, you can get the head of Salesforce, but I think it's, yeah, maybe partly that we're out of touch. I think there's a certain assumption that we're showcasing the best of the US, and I think one of the missed opportunities here has been a chance to really highlight some of the entrepreneurs, the founders, and the big companies from the 20 other economies, some of which are huge, of course, China, right? Mexico, Canada. There's just not as much global representation on stage as I would have expected.